Um, Hi, everyone. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here today and to tell you about a little bit about the work that I've done. And this time it's a bit strange. I'm not talking about my research, but I'm talking about the way in which I try to communicate my research to the wider public. So some of you may know that it's not very typical for a person of color, a woman of color, to be a vertebrate paleontologist. So I came into the field quite accidentally. I didn't have a plan to be a paleontologist. I just quite accidentally became a paleontologist. And I always think that we need to communicate science, particularly science, broadly science, to the wider community because many people in our country don't even have an idea that they could be scientists. And that was what my motivation was. And even as a postgraduate student, I also began communicating my science. But often people will say, but you're a vertebrate paleontologist. It's very easy to communicate your science and talk about dinosaurs. It's very easy to communicate and talk about dinosaurs. But actually, Albert Einstein said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. So don't make your science simple for the public. And he said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And that was Einstein talking about relativity theory. So anybody can communicate their science if you know your work well enough. So I always believe that when I talk to different audiences, you have to adjust what you are saying so that you are understandable and that you are engaging with your different audiences. And I like the expression, different strokes for different folks, because you have to know your audience. If you're talking to 5-year-olds or adults, you have to adjust how you speak, the way in which you speak, and the things that you say. And you have to make it relevant. You have to try and bring your conversation down to the level of the audience that you're speaking to. And then, of course, no matter who you speak with, as a scientist communicating to the public, you have to cut out the jargon and be as simple and straightforward as you can. I often have people ask me, so where do you speak? And I said, you shouldn't wait for an invitation to speak. In some cases, you should approach people and say, I have research that I'd like to communicate, and can I actually present it? Work with the science centers, work with museums. There's just so many places where one can actually talk to audiences and also engage with them. People sometimes are surprised, but even as a full professor at UCT, I make time to go to a school. And I can't understand why people, especially scientists, say, I'm so busy, I don't have time. I mean, I'm an A-rated researcher. That means I'm one of the top researchers in the country, internationally recognized, and yet I make the time. Because it's not too much of my time to spend half an hour at a school talking to kids about dinosaurs. Usually it's dinosaurs, but it could be fossils, it could be birds, it could be anything. But I make the time and I make myself available. And I think, when I talk to the kids, it's really wonderful to see how they engage and how they're so excited about science. I'm also very passionate about communicating science to women and to girls. And so I'm actively involved in the South African Women in Science and Engineering, the SAYs, and I used to be president of the organization, and I now serve just as a member, but I also actively do things with the organization. And we often have days where we invite girls to participate and talk about different careers in science, different ways in which they can themselves become scientists. Of course, UCT Open Day is another way in which we can engage with the wider public, and it's just amazing to be able to bring out all the stuff that we have in our labs. Well, we can't bring all the stuff, but some of the stuff out and have people engage with it and talk about the possibility. I mean, you see, some of the people are young, and they just talk about the possibility of becoming a marine biologist or becoming a paleontologist or entomologist, whatever the students are interested in. But it's a wonderful way just to engage with the wider public. In terms of my own research, I've published several high-profile papers, and one of these papers is this particular one called, well, it's the dinosaur is called Chinsamy-Turan. It's a really exceptionally well-preserved dinosaur, and it's really cool because it has feathers on its forelimbs and its hind limbs, and is what we call a four-winged dinosaur. Now, you know that birds are two-winged, but in the evolutionary history of dinosaurs, we know that some dinosaurs had four wings. And I was really thrilled to be a part of this project, and we named this dinosaur Chinsamy-Turan. And as you can imagine, it received worldwide attention. And this brings me to the point that was raised earlier today about how different institutions have different ways in which they communicate their science. So, interestingly, because I was part of such a big international team, the amount of media interest that this article generated, both in the printed media and TV, radio, online, I mean, you know, New York Times, an article, there was just so much, but it came not from South Africa, but because of the international collaborations. And I think that is one way in which we can also use our collaborators and join forces in trying to get our messages across. So we can actually combine our institutional knowledge, we can try to talk as much as we can, and also we can spread the word by actually joining with other institutions as well that are perhaps better networked and better connected. So that's certainly important as well. This was another important paper, and this was, again, one that was collaborative in nature. I was the first author on the paper, but it was a really cool study. And what we did here was, again, we did the media releases, but interestingly enough, we actually spread it internationally. So there was international focus on it, and locally, I was able to also speak on the radio, speak on TV, and try to explain to people why this was such an important discovery made right here in South Africa. And then, of course, I think I try to do this every time, because every time we have a paper that is published, I try to write a media release and try to spread the news about what research was conducted and why it is important. Why is this research important? And this was actually a study that was published with my postdoc, Delphine Angst, as first author, and it was about the dodo. And one of the things that are highlighted in the media release was that, you know, the dodo actually went extinct during human history, recently, even because of humans. But we know so little about the biology of the dodo, and we have to explore the biology of the dodo using a methodology that we developed to study dinosaurs. You know, that kind of message is really powerful because people suddenly realize, actually, we have to take better care of our modern biodiversity. And I think the fact that we continuously have a new article, and every article that my lab produces, we try to write these press releases and try to talk about it so that the public understands that science is not static, that science actually continuously evolves and continuously grows. And I always like to tell young people that at some time, they too can contribute to this knowledge base that we call science. I've also written many popular level articles, and I've just put these 2 here because these are from 2 new papers that came out. One was a study on these Australian marsupials, and it was published in 2023. And here again, I had collaborators in Australia and here in South Africa, and we made a really good joint effort to kind of publicize this work that we did. And I also wrote popular level article for the conversation as well. The other thing that I encourage is that my students, every time they write a paper, I try to get them to also talk about their research to the media, talk about their research to the wider public. And here we have an article that was published in the Quest magazine, which is a free magazine that goes to every school in the country, high school in the country. And my student and I wrote an article about the work that we did on a mosasaur from South Africa. And that was really, really wonderful because we had a lot of people write to her to engage with her about this work. And then, of course, well, I don't just wait for an article to come out. Sometimes when the opportunity arises, I actually try to kind of ride that wave and capitalize on what is going on at the time. So when Jurassic World came out, we know that there was a big public interest in Jurassic World. And every time I'd go somewhere, I'd get people stop me and ask me, so was this actually real? Is this actually real? Were mosasaurs so big? Did they actually attack pterosaurs that were flying? And I actually ended up writing an article that was published online about what was fact and what was fiction in Jurassic World. But just like that, I try to use the opportunities around us, and I try to kind of engage with things that are going on currently. I also realized that, one can write the articles, but you actually have to nowadays go online to actually reach a wider number of people. And so I certainly have a Facebook page, which we call UCT Paleo-biology. I'm quite active on Twitter, and my handle is indicated there. And we do blogs, and I have an Instagram post, which is, as you can see, my handle there again. And I have a YouTube channel as well. And surprisingly, I have a TikTok. I don't know what you call it, a channel, account. And the TikTok was quite interesting. I was on a field trip with third-year students. And so I made these little videos of them so excited about working on these tiny little fossils that they were discovering at Langebaan, which is a fossil site nearby. And I said, oh, I'm going to put it on Facebook. And they said, no, nobody our age is on Facebook. You have to put it on TikTok. And at the same time, they created a TikTok account for me. They uploaded the videos onto TikTok, and they gave me a crash course in how to use TikTok. So yeah, people, I have a TikTok account. So I think these different ways of reaching the public, one has to realize who you're talking to, because young people are not on Facebook anymore. But you don't only want to talk to young people, you also want to talk to the adult population. And I think for me, that is why I try all these different ways in which to reach these different audiences. One of the things that I realized several years ago now is that people don't read. So you write a press release, and not many people will actually read the press release. But if you have a short video, one that is less than 5 minutes, and ideally even less than 3 minutes, you can actually upload it onto different platforms, and you have a lot more engagement with this. And so these video blogs are really important. And what I've done is, so every paper that my lab produces, we write the press release, but we also make a little short video. And here you see one of my postdocs. It's Maria Eugenia Pereira, and we just published an article on caiman biology. And we decided actually to record this and then, of course, upload it onto the YouTube channel, and then, of course, it reaches many more people in this way. And we can share it, on Facebook, we can share it on Instagram. There's many different ways in which we can share this as well. But I also I've been able to write books, and you know, being an academic, one has to also write academic books. And my very first academic book was this one, published in 2005 by Johns Hopkins University Press. And it was the first book on this topic, because this was a very, very new field, and it was really a field that was growing. And I think because of my ability to communicate to the wider public, the book itself was written in a very accessible way. And what happened is that this book became a very important cornerstone for researchers. And whenever I go to a scientific meeting, I get so many young people come up to me and say, this is the book that got them started. So it's simply written, accessible, but it's an academic book, which is really very interesting. And the other one that I wrote also as an academic book was The Forerunners of Mammals. And this one actually celebrates this wonderful history that we have about the evolution of mammals here in Africa, and particularly in South Africa. So these are the two academic books that I have, and I'm currently busy on my third academic book. But this is the book that got me started on writing popular level. And this is called Famous Dinosaurs of Africa. Because whenever I'd go to talk to kids about dinosaurs, I was always completely surprised that they would not be able to name a single African dinosaur, let alone a South African dinosaur. And I said, we have to instill some pride in our own local heritage. And so I wrote this book about famous dinosaurs of Africa, and it literally celebrates 26 dinosaurs from Africa. And it was proofread by my 11-year-old son, who is now not 11 anymore, as you can imagine. And he's now actually just finished a PhD in chemical engineering. So, but he read this book with a red pen in his hand, okay? And he basically commented on all sorts of things. And one of the things that lots of kids love about the book is that it has a pronunciation guide. And that came from my son, because he said, how do you say this? You know, and I really incorporated that because of him. And also the maps came from him, because he would say, so where is Algeria? Where is Morocco? And the bottom line is that when one is actually writing a book for a popular audience, you have to make sure you get the right target audience to proofread your book. And so because of his input, I think the book actually benefited tremendously from this. And one of the things that I also included was the thing about unsolved mysteries, because you know, kids want to know that there's still the unknown. There's still this excitement that has to be discovered, and that they themselves maybe can work towards that. And so I try to include that as well. So it was published twice, and then in 2021, there's a new version of it. This is my two pandemic books, and in fact, I brought copies of them, so you can just circulate them around. Maybe you can just send them around. And so, yeah, these are my two pandemic books, because, you know, holed up at home, I kind of really got involved in writing, and I decided to update the famous dinosaurs, and now we have Dinosaurs of Africa, and the dinosaurs and other prehistoric life. And before that, I published this book about the fossils for Africa, because in Africa, we have such a wonderful heritage of fossils that go from the very beginning of time. So lots of information about fossils from Africa. But I also then realized that you have to go wider. And then I developed an online course called Extinctions, and this one was really incredibly well received and was one of the top 50 MOOCs worldwide and one of the top, actually the top science MOOC in the world. So this also was very important. And I was also asked to do a TED Talk in December 2022, which was also very interesting. And even though my focus was on my research, I actually brought it down to the fact that we are facing the 6th extinction. So one has to make this relevant to the wider public. I think that is always very important. And then I featured on a number of documentaries, and of course, you know, even if you say hi on a David Attenborough show, it's good enough. So actually, I have little snippets of little conversations with David Attenborough, and it's very funny. I can tell you at tea break how these conversations happen. When you look at it, you think we were sitting across each other, but we certainly weren't. But nevertheless, and I've had some recent shows on Nova and on PBS, and they all really engage with science. But what I always think, but you know, I haven't really evaluated how much impact my work has made. And recently, one of my former postdocs actually sent me an email, and he said, "So, I see you made it in the popular culture." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Do you know you feature in this book?" And he sent me a picture, and I said, "I had no idea." Okay, but, and it was quite obviously me. I mean, don't you see the resemblance? I mean, it is really quite cute. And of course, it does name me, so it is definitely me. So that was pretty cool. And then, shortly thereafter, there was another book that was published about she-found fossils, again, from trying to encourage women in paleontology. And I was also featured there. And then there was this book on the dinosaur expert. And there's a couple more that have come out since then, which I haven't even had a chance to make a slide yet. And so there are definitely other opportunities. And because my book, the dinosaurs, the DK book, I mean, who has it at the moment? Somebody has the DK book. Yeah, because that book is so beautiful and has been, had such a global reach. I mean, it's been translated into 5 different languages. I get people from around the world sending me pictures, little video clips with their kids with the book. And then, more recently, I got this little beautiful image of, this is Jane Goodall, okay, and this is Dr. Anusuya Chinsamy-Turan holding a book. So I haven't measured impact, but I think these are really cool. They say something, okay? And then, since my famous Dinosaurs of Africa book had come out such a long time ago, those little kids have grown up. And now, when I am teaching first-year biology, every now and again, I have kids come up to me and say, "You know, I had your book when I was 5, or I had your book when I was 7. And this year, this young guy came to me and he said, "I have your book and you signed it for me when I was 7 years old," and he brought the book in to show me, and he said, "I have to have a picture with you so I can send it to my mom," because he said, "When I was growing up, I was crazy about dinosaurs, and my mom used to read your book to me every single night." And so he was very delighted to meet me, and just like that, the other kids that I come across. But I want to say that for those of you that are scientists in this room, and if you come from South Africa, and we spoke about the fact that we have this lack of infrastructure to support us, many of us as scientists have to make our own stories. We have to actually publicize our own work. We have to engage with the public about the work that we do. And again, I want to reiterate that one should not wait for an opportunity to come knocking at your door, but you have to make your own opportunities. You've got to find ways in which you can talk to the wider public. And I know that several young people have said, we don't get recognition, and that universities don't give recognition. But you know, recognition is only part of the story. I think that if you do the good research, you are the best possible person to write about your research. And I think there is a skill in being able to write simply and being able to write in an engaging manner for the wider public. But it's a skill worth developing. And I encourage you to find your way, and most importantly, always tell a good story. Tell a story that matters, and tell a story that is relevant. And I think that would get you to many, many different places all over the world. Thank you.